Hello and welcome to Genealogy Adventures, and today we're going to talk about slave cohabitation records, otherwise officially known as a register of colored persons. These records were collected by the Freedmen Bureau and basically document freed slaves at the end of the Civil War living together as man and wife. And the really good thing as well is that they have children and children living with them. Those children are also documented. As you can imagine, the really big genealogy websites all have this information, whether it's Ancestry.com, FamilySearch.org. If you're familiar with the Freedmen Bureau's website, their database also has these records. And if you kind of take a minute or two to read through this information that's on the FamilySearch site, get some really good information about the cohabitation records, who did them, why they were done, what they kind of measured. But again, if you look a little further down, you'll notice that not every slave-owning state actually commissioned them. So, for instance, South Carolina is a really noticeable omission from this list. I'm not really sure why some of the slave states allowed it and some of them didn't. But one reason might be that not every slave-owning state actually legally recognized the institution of marriage for slaves. And actually, for this one, Virginia is kind of a unique example. A lot of Virginia slave owners not only encouraged their slaves to marry, but the state actually legalized those marriages. I guess the nice thing is, even though the legal marriage option was still there, the state of Virginia still commissioned to have these cohabitation records done. So I'm going to leave this up for a minute more, but if you'd like the URL to visit to go to exactly the same page, you'll notice the URL is up here. So if I move on too quickly, feel free to pause the video at this point, jot down the URL, which I'll also make sure is in the description of the video, so you can just click and go. So for my purposes, because a lot of my ancestors actually started in Virginia, that's the state that I want to check out first. So on this page, we have a little bit more about the Virginia state law, more about the actual registers, but as you slowly scroll down, you can see that just about every county in Virginia actually commissions this set of records to be produced. Now, while my Roan ancestors lived in one part of the state of Virginia, my Sheppey ancestors lived in another. And for the Sheppeys, both Smythe, which is right there, and Wythe, which are these two here, feature prominently in their history, so those are going to be some of the first places I'm going to visit to find out more. And actually, Wythe is a really good example. This does happen in quite a few of the counties. What they did is they actually created two different kind of registers, all based on the same kind of concept. So if we go down to Wythe, we're going to take a look at this first one. This is actually the register of children of colored persons whose parents have ceased to cohabit. Basically, their parents don't live together anymore. I can't be asked to read that whole thing out. Their parents no longer live together. This second one, right here, that's the actual register of colored persons. We're going to take a look at that one as well. So without further ado, let's take a look at the one about the children whose parents aren't living with them anymore. I'm going to open that up in a new tab. Here we have them all again. Wythe, no doubt, is going to be on page 2, seeing as how this is all alphabetically arranged. And here we go. Register of children whose parents aren't living together anymore. And what you do is, when that new tab opens, you just click on this object, or you can click on that little icon here. They both do the same thing. So this schedule is now open. Basically, this is the transcription over here on the left, so you can cruise around from page to page. There's information that's provided about the register. And again, if you're going to cite any information from this, it's always a good idea to make sure that you always credit both the title and the creator. It's just a polite thing to do. I'm going to make this larger so it's easier to read. And I'm going to start to have a little scroll through. But before I actually do that, so what kind of data has actually been collected on these? Well, you can see you have the name of a child and his or her age, the child's place of birth, their current residence, their last slave owner. Again, I can see it probably sends a couple of smiles there because, again, these cohabitation records are an amazing way to actually be able to find out if one of your ancestors was a slave, and especially around the time of the end of the Civil War, when they were living in one of the states with this kind of a census. You can actually find out who that last slave owner was. Be able to go to the 1860s slave schedule, which got covered in the previous video, and start to work out which one of those slaves on that list, the 1860s slave schedule, might be one of your ancestors. So again, these cohabitation registers and registers with children of more or less divorced parents can actually provide you with the name of their last slave owner, which again is going to be a really, really important and critical piece of information if, like me, in your family, you have some of your ancestors actually have been slaves. So last slave owner, his or her last place of residence, which is there, basically where the residence or the area where the father is currently living, as well as his age. And again, you're going to probably realize that his age is probably radically different than other ages that you might have for him. It gives the name of the father's last donor, where the father's last donor lives, the name and the age of the mother, and again, same information from her. Where she's living at the moment, if she's still alive, or where she was living at the moment the census was taken, whether she was dead, her last donor's residence, and then the father's signature. So again, from an African American genealogical point of view, these registers are absolute gold dust. Again, a lot of times I'll actually find the maiden name of someone who's married into the family through this cohabitation register. So for instance, Margaret's no longer just Margaret, married to Daniel Henry Sheffey, she's now Margaret Clark. She has her full and proper name. So I've done a quick scan through. As luck would have it, there are 3 members from the extended Sheffey family on here. The surname is again misspelled, but clearly them, I know exactly who they are. I remember when I found them, I've been looking for them for a little while, so I was quite happy to actually find them. Like I said, as luck would have it, they're literally the last 3 entries in this particular register for wife. So here we have Mitchell Sheffey, his half-brother Edward, and his half-sister Belle Sheffey. It has their ages, 10, 10, and 5, where they're currently living, which is wife, which is where I would expect them to be. It gives the name of their last slave owner, John Sanders. So again, 3 kids, all half-brothers and sisters, all owned by the same person, in the same county. And scrolling over to the right a little bit more, here we have the names of their mothers. So 2 of them are indeed brothers. They're not half-brothers or full brothers. Their mother's Judy Clark, which again is a really good thing to have because, again, for this particular lady, trying to find her correct name is an absolute nightmare. She's alternatively listed as July, Judy, June. There's another J in there somewhere, so to finally definitively find out that her name is indeed Judy and none of the others was brilliant. We have an age, 24. So to get her rough year of birth, we subtract the age of 24 from 1866, when the census was taken, or the schedule was taken, to get her year of birth. Belle Sheffey, on the other hand, is the daughter of Emily Cook, same age as Judy Clark. With her, we actually have her date of death, By the time the census had been taken, she'd already been dead for almost a year. Again, she's owned by John Saunders, and it just so happens so is Judy Clark, although I found that out somewhere else. Everyone's in wife, and there's Mitchell Sheffey, their father. So apart from the very obvious information that this is telling me about, the kind of who, what, why, where, when, and when, and how, the interesting thing that it's saying is Mitchell Sheffey, who's still very much alive in 1866, specifically February 1866 when this was taken, is no longer on the scene in terms of, for Judy Clark or Emily Cook. Indeed, he's actually married. He's married to someone completely different than either one of these ladies. So, as I said, that's the extra bit of information. He's acknowledged as the father. He's even acknowledging himself to be the father. But he's no longer living with either of these ladies. I guess the other interesting thing as well is as you start to find and claim more maiden names for the ladies in your family tree, you're going to assume, especially if you lived in a rural area, more than likely you're going to realize that people are marrying into and out of the same groups of families. And I mention that because John Bird, who's right here, just above Mitchell Sheffey, he's actually Mitchell Sheffey's second cousin. There had been basically over about 75 to 80 years, there have been loads of intermarriages between the Birds, the Sheffeys, the Carpenters, the Hills, and a couple of other families. So in a way, they're kind of like one huge, massive, extended family. So again, it's interesting to see that John Bird, Mitchell Sheffey, who are cousins, are right here in the same cohabitation register. So basically, I found what I wanted to find in this particular one. Again, it's all about children of divorced parents, more or less. So now I want to go back to the other cohabitation register, the kind of standard proper 1866 cohabitation register, to find out if there's any more Sheffeys in there. So I'm going to close this page down. I'm going to close this down. So here's our second one. This is the proper cohabitation register. I'm going to click that. I'm going to open that object up in a new tab. So again, you're going to find a lot of this. This is laid out slightly differently, but at its heart, it's still organized the same way as the Children of Divorced Parents register. On the left-hand side, if you want to quickly skip from one page to another, you can do so there. You can also scroll down with a scroll bar here. Information about the actual register itself. And like the other one, I'm going to try to increase the size on this one. And while the kids might have been the very last ones on the previous register, here we go. This is my great-great-grandfather, Daniel Sheffey. First one. Couldn't have asked for better, really. So what does this register look like? So again, everything is done by page number, by line number, and then we start getting into the meat of it. So we have the husband's name and age, husband's birthplace, the husband's current residence, his occupation, last owner, where the last owner lived, wife's name, wife's birthplace, wife's residence, her last owner's residence, all of their children and their children's ages, and roughly when the date of that cohabitation actually occurred. So basically, for all intents and purposes, May 23rd, 1840 is their legal marriage date. So hopefully you already have a sense of the quality of data and information that you can actually collect about members of your family. So as I said, this is my great-grandfather, Daniel Sheffey, 1865, as at the time of this particular register. What's really interesting about his place of birth is on every other single document that I've ever seen for him, including his death certificate, it's always listed as Wythe County, Virginia. So something interesting is going on here. I'm not really sure what it's all about, but he's got a radically different county of birth than on any other official document for him. But what it is saying is he's currently, in terms of 1866, he's living in Wytheville. He's a farmer. His last owner was Mrs. Sue Spiller, which has actually been corroborated by other sources, including a book about the Battle of Wytheville. With this particular Daniel was cited as actually being a hero. He's put out a couple of fires and saved some lives, so good chap. Mrs. Sue Spiller, again, resident of Wytheville. His wife's name, that's actually a misspelling. It should be Margaret Clark, not whatever it is, not what it says there. Her place of birth, which never been able to find other than this one particular document, Reed Creek in Wythe County, Virginia. Scrolling along, obviously if they're living together and he's living in Wytheville, she's living in Wytheville, so that doesn't really come as any great kind of a shock. What's really interesting is her owner is Mrs. Julia Ann Morrison. Now the Morrisons, the Spillers, and the Sheffys are all related through, again, just generations of intermarriages between the families. So there's a very, very close connection there with them. Moving along to the next column, we have their children. And again, what came as a real revelation in this one is I found it really difficult to find Daniel in the 1870 census. I already knew he had a child called Daniel, who was my great-grandfather, who's listed here as 22. I also knew he had a son called John. Didn't know he had a son called Adam, nor did I know he had a son called Jefferson, or another one called Wade. So again, within my own immediate family, all of a sudden there were these new family members, the names of which none of us had ever heard before, or knew. So again, really, really nice find to stumble across. Scrolling down a couple of pages, we get to line 22, where there's a William Wynn, born in Georgia. And he's interesting for a couple of different reasons. Again, we have Sheffys who were taken to Alabama. We have Sheffys that were born in Alabama, and there's a really strong connection between Alabama Sheffys and Alabama Wynns. So this is something that I've actually marked for further research to find out more about the Wynns of Georgia. Where does William Wynn fit in? Is he part of the same family? No connection, just similarity of surname. Again, something that I'm putting on the back burner for a rainy day to try and figure out more about his connection to the Wynns in Alabama. But the reason why I'm pulling this one up is we can see that William Wynn, living in Wytheville, gives the name of his last owner, who's also living in Wytheville. So again, that's another way that Mr. Wynn actually came to the neighborhood. He's married to an Eliza Sheffy. Again, another variation of the surname, another misspelling, who's given us 38. Also residents in Wythe County, as you'd expect, their husband and wife. Eliza's one of these mysterious people. I know that she's a Sheffy by birth. She's not a Sheffy by marriage. I have not been able to find out who her parents are, so I haven't been able to connect her to the overall family tree. But there's still, there's some clues that I'm working with. Joe Castle's her last owner. I've never come across him as owning Sheffy slaves before, so I'm not really sure how the Castle family figures into this kind of overall narrative. But again, importantly, here are the Wynn children, who are also Sheffys: Robert, Stuart, Maria, and Elizabeth. And in terms of marriage dates, there's not a date, but there is a year. It's basically saying this couple has been together since 1860. So again, another really good find. And again, on page number 3, line 24, we have Stuart Sheffy with one of the most interesting variations on our name that I think I've ever seen. He's given us 33, living in Wythe, actually living in Wytheville. He's a general laborer. Samuel Castle, again, I need to find out more about this Castle family, was his last owner, living in Wythe County. Stuart married Angela Angelica Curran, age 34. She was born in Pulaski, but is now living in Woodville. Again, not sure how she went from Pulaski to Woodville, but there you go, she did. Her last owner was Robert Gibney, misspelling on that name, current in Woodville, and their children, William, Mary, James, and Charles. And in terms of the rough year of marriage, or the time of their marriage, was the fall of 1857. So that's a bit of an overview. What I would say is, whether you're new to researching your family history or fairly well advanced, if you have a really large tree or a really small tree, what I would really recommend is really spending some time with these registers, especially if you're beginning to find any of your ancestors in them, for a few reasons. It's something I'm going to go over in a later video, and I know I've kind of introduced this in a couple of videos back. If your family members are living in a really, really rural area, and they've been there for any length of time, and for the Sheffys in both Smythe County in Virginia and Wythe County of Virginia, they've been there since basically the mid-1700s. So they've been residents in these two counties for a really, really long time. And in that time, they both married into and out of roughly the same 5 or 6 families. Some of these families were also owned by the same slave owners as my Sheffy ancestors, but quite a few weren't. But the same surnames keep popping up again and again and again, really emphasizing this kind of huge family that just happens to have many different surnames. And if you think about your own family, think about all the different families that your female ancestors have married into, think about all the women that have married into your family, you kind of get an idea. Lots of cousins, lots of different names, but you're all connected by blood. And when you slowly work your way through these documents, again, for me, when I see surnames like Carroll, Hill, Robinson, Bagby, Carpenter, Bird, Price, I knew that all of these people living in close proximity to my Sheffy ancestors, they're all related. And again, going through these records, that really does play out. By slowly going through these records and recognizing family names from the extended family, like Carpenter for instance, I've been able to go back into my family tree, find someone like, say, Stuart Sheffy's grandmother. I discovered that she was a Green. So there was yet another Green Sheffy marriage connection. So there you are. These are the county cohabitation registers. There's 2 variations. There's one with kids, basically from divorced parents. Also, the register that you're looking at the moment, which is all about family groups and former slaves living together as man and wife. As always, I hope you found this video useful, and I hope it's given you confidence to get out there and start tackling these cohabitation records. Happy hunting, and until the next time, see you later.